Welcome to a special discussion with B'nai B'rith International on the growing crisis in Ukraine. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. We appreciate your being with us today. We're now in the middle of the third week since the start of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. The international community is acutely focused on the devastating humanitarian crisis unfolding there. With more than 2 million refugees so far, the mass exodus is frighteningly reminiscent of a refugee crisis across Europe during World War II. At the same time, the situation for those remaining in Ukraine is dire as there is indiscriminate firing in many civilian areas. Many of us are asking the same question: what more can we do? How can we help? Joining us today to help answer that question is Karyn Gershon, CEO of Project Kesher, whose mission is to build Jewish community and advance civil society by developing and empowering women leaders. As it happens, today, March 8th, is also International Women's Day. Our conversation with Karyn is all the more timely and important as we recognize the strength and fortitude of women all around the world, but especially today in Ukraine. We're also proud to have established the B'nai B'rith Women's Leadership Network, empowering Jewish female leaders around the world to advocate for global Jewry and for a safe and secure Israel. We know that men between the ages of 18 and 60 cannot leave Ukraine as they must stay back to defend the country. That means women alone are responsible to seek shelter and safety for themselves, their children, their elderly parents, and their families. This program today is dedicated to these incredible women being tested in unimaginable ways. Karyn Gershon joined Project Kesher as its executive director in 1994 and was instrumental in growing its Jewish women's activist network to more than 180 communities in Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and Israel. She's a graduate of Cornell University and Northwestern University School of Law. We are also joined today by our own Alina Bricman, B'nai B'rith's Director of European Affairs, who is joining us on the Romanian border with Ukraine as she is there to assist the crisis in real time. We're also joined by our Director of Development, Andrea, who is tirelessly working, trying to coordinate our disaster relief efforts, raising funds for Ukraine over the past few weeks. Right now, the Project Kesher network is mobilizing globally to support Ukrainian women and families. Their staff in Ukraine is on the ground, either sheltering in place or traveling in search of safety. Their activists have crossed into bordering countries of Europe, many with children and elderly family members depending on them. All the while, Project Kesher leaders in Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and Israel are fielding requests from Ukrainian women for help with evacuation, support at the border, immigrating to Israel, and accessing emergency support services. Project Kesher is in daily contact with women in their Jewish relief efforts on the ground and in Europe. Similarly, B'nai B'rith International and its affiliates in Europe are mobilizing to help with immediate essentials as well as long-term needs for the Ukrainian people. Karyn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, please tell us a bit about the situation on the ground from the perspective of Project Kesher and your leadership on the ground, and how your staff are managing in Ukraine at the moment.
I don't think that anyone actually expected the war to take place until it actually started. And as a result, I think there is so much shock and real disbelief at both the fact that it happened and that it has happened as aggressively as it has. Almost everybody in our network is displaced. Even people who are staying in the country have been moving out of the way of the approaching military. And every day they check in between like 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning to let us know that they're alive, where they are, and whether they're in motion. The reports from the country are horrifying. We are hearing stories of trips across the country that should take 6, 7 hours and are taking 17 to 20 hours. We are hearing stories of people trying to get on trains as they leave the city and people tell them it is reminiscent of the stories of the Holocaust. There are people standing, they are hanging out of windows, we can't get them out fast enough. It is completely daunting. That said, every morning after they check in, they ask what they can do to help. And it is amazing to me that women are finding themselves, 4 hours further ahead in their journey, and they'll pause for 2 hours and call back to find out where every other woman in their women's group and their network is today. And we're doing a bunch of things to try to help them support as wide a group of women and girls as possible. As you alluded, really every woman in Ukraine is now a single mom because their husbands are all conscripted. They're all in the military now. So as they make these decisions, they're making decisions that they've really never had to make, of a magnitude they've never had to make on their own. And frankly, every morning when somebody is packing and they're talking to me at the same time, I look around my apartment and I can only imagine what would I pack if I were leaving everything behind and moving, and not knowing if I would get to come back or if my apartment would be standing. As they call in, we're trying to give them a framework for support in the area. We are able to get money into the country. We are transferring money to the debit cards of women who are in motion. We are making what I would call small grants. Most of them are in the $100 to $500 range, depending on how many people are in their group. And our goal is really to make sure that people don't end up at the border with nothing on them. I don't think people realize how poor Ukrainians are. The average Ukrainian I know makes between $300 and $500 a month. So they don't have a bank account, they don't have a credit card, and when they are traveling, they may be traveling with very minimal amounts of money. So we just want to see that they get some money in their hands. So the main things we're working on are sort of evacuation plans for each woman. We have a lot of therapists actually out of Israel talking to them. And then we try to get some money into their hands. And we're also working to underwrite some evacuation efforts. I was very thrilled to be introduced to Alina today because one of the things that we can give them that gives them enormous comfort is that the quality of people greeting them on the other side, like your own Alina Bricman, it's really just so heartwarming. I'm hearing stories from women that they literally cross the border and somebody from, it could be B'nai B'rith or the JDC or the JCC literally greets them with a hug and an understanding that there will be a place to stay tonight and there will be a place to go for food. But the mass of humanity is almost incomprehensible, I think, for most of us. People are talking about, thousands and thousands at the border getting processed to go through, and it is simply daunting.
I think this particular situation where the 18 to 60-year-old men are being conscripted, leaving, as you've said, women to work out these issues of survival, of trying to get out, of day to day, certainly is unique in terms of refugee issues, let's say, since 1945. But let me ask a couple of specific questions about being able to contact people in your network inside Ukraine. So early on, we heard just a few days after the invasion began that the ATMs had closed down, that the banks were not open, internet down, people looking for charging stations for their phones. How exactly are you communicating to these folks on the ground? You say they call in at 4 a.m. Are there still means, technological means, to be in touch today as they were 2 weeks ago?
It's actually getting better. I'm finding that we have not lost touch with anyone at all. I think that some of our concerns were the hypotheticals. There was a real concern that the Russians would be very sophisticated about taking down the internet and the cell phones. And I really, it's like my grandmother would say, like, poo, poo, poo. Today, as of today, we have not lost touch with one person. And I would also tell you that we were very worried about the ATM machines, and there were a few times where we couldn't get cash out because the way the system is working in Ukraine, they cannot move cash freely through the country. The roads are so crowded, the trucks are being used by the military, but the debit cards are working. And what we've been able to do mostly is go debit card to debit card. But we had one bank account in Ukraine for probably 30 years. And in the last week, we've opened 8 accounts so that as the country has to move west to be safe, we have different banks in different parts of Europe that can take our cash, and they are hopefully, even if 1 or 2 go down, they won't all go down. So we have been diversifying. We've also gotten much more sophisticated with PayPal, and we've even been dabbling with cryptocurrency because we've been told that we can get that onto women's phones, and that in places like Poland, they can go right to an ATM and download the cryptocurrency. So we've got a lot of strategies in place. Our fallback strategy on communication, believe it or not, are ham operators, which go back to the world wars where people communicated that way. But our leaders have been in touch with a variety of people in Ukraine so that if we lose contact, we will be able to stay in touch that way. The radio system in Ukraine is also becoming much stronger. They're trying to make it so that people, even if they lose the internet, will be able to understand what's going on and where the challenges are going to be through traditional radio.
Well, let's move to Alina. There are basically 3 borders that have been open and are open. One is Poland, one is Slovakia, one is Romania, and there are other ways and other places, but primarily from the beginning, it's primarily been those 3 countries as crossing points, if you will, or border openings. So, Alina, you're currently at the border in Romania, your home country, working alongside volunteers and staff of many NGOs and Jewish organizations. Tell us, if you will, where you are, exactly where you're situated, to give us a sense geographically. Ukraine is a very big country. I think that many of us here in this country don't realize how big it is. Bigger than a couple of our largest states. And so it does share borders with a number of countries. But please share with us what you're seeing, and just tell us what the last 24 hours has been like.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be with you, Karyn. Let me just say you're doing incredible work, and a lot of the people I've seen over the past 24 hours are beneficiaries of organizations like yours. So that work can really not be measured. What I've seen over the past 24 hours is essentially a mix of heartwarming and heartbreaking things. Like you said, Dan, Romania has a very large border with Ukraine, about 500 miles essentially. I'm located in a border called Siret, which is the Romanian side to Chernobitz in Ukraine, where a rather sizable Jewish community is located as well. It's very interesting to be on the ground because you get a sense of really the practical problems that people are facing once they are here. Things are quite ad hoc. There's not a lot of infrastructure, not a lot of state organized infrastructure. There are a lot of volunteer organizations with limited capacity, which offer food and beverages, some medicine, some assistance for children, but are not able to provide a large infrastructure for further support. We see people coming in by car, but also by foot, walking a long distance from the Ukrainian side. It's extremely, extremely cold. There's been about 300,000 Ukrainians passing through Romania, and the majority of them have come through this very border. Many of them do not speak English. As time passes, we see Ukrainians that are coming from more dire conditions, who are less likely to have the means to have a proper plan in place. And there are very few translators. Those who do speak Ukrainian or Russian might not speak Romanian, so everything is just very complicated. And you get a sense that really every person needs a lot of assistance, has their own unique story, their own unique circumstances, their own very complicated plans. And there is just not yet enough infrastructure to support that. At the same time, there is a lot of goodwill. Romanian people have really mobilized. You see a lot of emotion, you see a sense of kinship. Within the Jewish community, there has been a large effort to make sure that the Jewish community is provided for, that there is a Jewish infrastructure, that people that need kosher food will have it, that people who need assistance to make aliyah will receive that. But still, there is a lot of confusion. People don't always know where they arrive. They were told they will get to one border with one country, but as they travel through Ukraine, the situation is just too dangerous and routes end up changing. Times are very unpredictable. So indeed, it's a very, very difficult, extremely difficult, beyond imagination, what each of these people are going through. And a lot of them come here still with a smile on their face, with confidence, with a wish to really maintain their dignity. Women often will want to make sure that they take care of themselves. They will put on makeup and just, want to give themselves that feeling that they are the same person that they were when they left.
Yeah, well, that's quite a story about maintaining self-respect in the midst of this terrible humanitarian disaster. Alina, how are the Ukrainians who are leaving through Romania, how are they getting there? We know, for example, that the trains were running from Kiev to Lviv, at least until now. How do they actually get to the Romanian side? Are they on buses? You said some come by foot.
Yeah, so a lot of people are coming with their private cars, and probably in those circumstances, it's even trickier to organize. Some people are coming with organized buses. These people will generally have an affiliation to some community that has aided them. This has often been the case with groups from the Jewish community. So you will suddenly receive a group of 50, 100 people who all require a lot of information, who do not speak the language, who each want to tell you their own needs in terms of where they need to go to, and who will need a lot of information, understandably. But indeed, there are people just coming by foot. There are Ukrainian buses that stop on the Ukrainian side, and then they need to walk a certain distance still to the border. You will see a lot of people who have their possessions in plastic bags, not in trawlers per se, indicative of the fact that they had to just flee extremely quickly, that they were not predicting this, that they didn't have a time to properly pack. So it's quite a mixed bag there. You will really see people from all walks of life. So, it's a microcosmos of all of Ukraine, I'm sure.
So just one more question before we move to Andrea. So the largest city, from what I understand, to the largest Ukrainian city, closest to the border is Chernobitz. Are the 500,000 or so, or 300,000 who have come into Romania, are they largely from that regional area of Ukraine, or are they coming from all places because they know that the Romanian border is open to get to that opening?
Indeed. So a majority are coming through here, but also a lot of people are coming through Moldova. So from Ukraine, they've passed to the Republic of Moldova, and from there they come to Romania. So these are sort of the main two channels. Then there is a crossing in Sighetul Marmației, the hometown of Elie Wiesel, and a couple of others more towards the south, essentially. So there are also a lot of Jews coming from the Odessa region as well, but they have mostly come through Moldova.
Yeah, these are iconic Jewish places in terms of Jewish history. The Ukraine has produced over the centuries some of our most important religious figures, cultural figures, Zionist figures. When we hear these cities that are mentioned, this is a story by itself that these remaining communities now are facing these dire circumstances. Andrea, let's move to you. If you can, share with our viewers what B'nai B'rith International has been doing since the start of the war. You have been coordinating this with her colleague, Rhonda Love, both to raise funds and to help meet the needs of the Jewish community in Ukraine.
Sure. Well, disaster relief and humanitarian aid is one of the core pillars of our work here at B'nai B'rith. We've been working in this sphere for over 170 years. We mobilized our disaster relief committee about 2 weeks ago and put out a call for support for our Ukraine Assistance Fund, and the response has been quite good, not surprising. We've been working with our members and lodges across Europe, and it's just been amazing to see the B'nai B'rith family come together and do what they do best, help. They're driving forward over a dozen relief efforts across Europe to help refugees. And what we're doing specifically, we're working to transfer goods on the ground in Poland for refugees and getting vital goods and medical supplies back into the Ukraine. As we speak here, 1,000 jars of baby food and cereal are headed to a center in Warsaw for Ukrainian refugees, as are warm clothing items and other necessities. One area we're focused on is getting those medical supplies that I mentioned into Lviv. We're working with B'nai B'rith partners in Poland, and we're sending over 30,000 pieces of supplies, ranging from antibiotics to dressings, casts, and more. We're also working to get generators and other necessities into the Ukraine for our lodge members. I would just say we're continuously working through our network to get the help to those who need it on the ground.
Now that we've set up this system, and you mentioned a dozen different efforts, B'nai B'rith in Germany, the B'nai B'rith in Frankfurt in particular, B'nai B'rith in Italy, working together with the Union of Italian Jewish Communities in terms of finding temporary housing for those refugees that might reach and have been reaching Italy. B'nai B'rith in the United Kingdom. This is really it's a real international effort. The project to help bring those medical supplies into Lviv is particularly interesting, and it's headed by the man who chairs B'nai B'rith in Warsaw, who is an eminent and highly respected medical doctor in his own right. Tell us a little bit more about how that sprang up.
Well, it's just as we watched this unfold, we started to connect with B'nai B'rith leaders across Europe to see what we could do, what they were doing. A lot of our lodges have longstanding connections to communities in the Ukraine. We have lodges in the Ukraine. And so with that in mind, we connected with Andrea's, and we were able to identify the fact that they're working with a hospital through their hospital to get goods back into Lviv. And there's also, this is in conjunction with, I would say, Polish government convoy assistance. It's not so easy to get goods back in. So it's really an all hands on deck effort.
So what can people do who are watching right now who feel they want to do something? I mean, we have seen this tremendous international outpouring. I think, the difference is, you were talking, Karyn, about the technology works. We were apprehensive that it wouldn't, that it would shut down, because we're just accustomed to hacking, and we're accustomed to all kinds of things that can be done. Technology is good, but there are ways also of bringing it down, but it hasn't. What we've seen with this war is that they've been glued to their TV sets or their phones or their devices, and they're watching real time in a way really that they have not been able to do in any other international crisis. I mean, we really know real time. I just this morning watching TV interview with a young Ukrainian child. His English was terrific, and he was giving it was answering the questions about where they were going, why they were going. He had family in Germany. They were headed to Germany. We know more today than we've ever known about a crisis as we've watched it unfold. So there are a lot of people out there who say, what can I do? And through the technology that's available to us, we can help. So for those who want to do something right now, tell us what they can do to help. And I would just say one other thing. In terms of, we have something called an action alert, which is a notification system to our folks to write to their member of Congress to support, this issue or that. In this particular situation, we now have Congress, which is acting on a massive aid package, and here in the United States, and certainly we want to get behind that, and we'll be doing that through our action alert system. But tell us, if people would like to do something, how do they do it?
So, when we first connected with Karyn last week, Karyn, you said something that has stuck with me. People should give whatever they can and give widely. So many organizations have launched funds for help, and every dollar is so very needed. So people should support and give whatever they can. Seriously, in times such as these, every dollar counts. And just as you said, Dan, people should really urge Congress to pass the Ukraine emergency spending package. This is what you just mentioned via the action alert system. We have it posted on our site, and it easily allows you to reach your local representative. This is very important. Everyone needs to lend their voice to this.
Yeah, Karyn, let's come back to you. Several days ago, there were the reports that rockets had been sent to take down the Kyiv TV tower, and the collateral damage went over into the area of the Babin Yar Memorial, located in an adjacent area. Babin Yar was the site of one of the most horrifying moments in the Shoah and of human history, with over 33,000 Jews murdered in the span of 2 days. I mean, it really leaves one speechless to think that the war going on right now came so close to a place still in the memory of many people where so many Jews died in just over a 2-day span. You're very connected to the Jewish community in Ukraine. How do you think the community is bearing up? I mean, we've talked about the various ways of getting out, of providing assistance. You've worked with the community for over 30 years. What do you think the state of the Jewish community is now? I've seen op-eds by leaders of the community whom I know, rabbis, leaders of the community, people who had decided to stay, to make their lives there. And indeed, there has been a vibrant Jewish life in Ukraine, religious activity and other activity, cultural activity. What are you sensing today in terms of this iconic Jewish community?
I would tell you that the Jewish community has been absolutely extraordinary, and that everybody on this call should be incredibly impressed and proud to be part of the Jewish community. I would tell you that if they leave their towns, it will be short term. They believe in Ukraine. They believe in its ability to be free, and they are going to go back and, to the best of their ability, to fight. I think that they want to live in a free country. They want to be Jews where they live. They are incredibly proud of President Zelensky and so proud that he is Jewish. And I think that the long history of Ukraine and its anti-Semitism is in the rear mirror for them. They believe that this is a society that is welcoming to Jews and where they could really thrive moving forward. So it is my hope and prayer that this war will end quickly and that they will be able to resume their Jewish life, because I know that most of the Jews I know from Ukraine would like to do so. I think the attack on the tower, the TV tower, was particularly unfortunate because of its proximity to Babi Yar. It is the symbol of the greatest heartbreak in Jewish history in this region. And accordingly, people just, the minute they heard, people were just devastated. I want to say that the first person who called me before I even saw it on the news in the United States were non-Jewish friends in Ukraine who sent me a note that said, "We are devastated as Ukrainians, we are devastated for the Jewish community, and we stand with you." So I think for me, that says a lot about the Ukraine that's become today. In closing, I just want to add one thing about how you can help. I think that Americans need to send their money to groups like B'nai B'rith and humanitarian efforts that are expert on the ground. What B'nai B'rith is able to do in terms of accumulating materials across Europe and supplies and getting them in is not something that Americans can do by sending things from here. It is not feasible. What you are able to do, where you can identify exactly what is needed on the ground, that you know where to get it to, that you can warehouse it and distribute it and get it into the hands of the right people, is the key to success. If we started packing up clothing and supplies in the US, it could form an enormous pile of goods that no one can use, because if it doesn't have the network, it can't be used properly. And the roads are clogged with refugees, the military, and other supply efforts. So please rely on the experts like B'nai B'rith to do this work. It's the only way that will be effective.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Karyn. Your steadfast dedication to this cause is inspiring, and we hope to have more Jewish leaders like you working on the ground or on the borders, as we are, to assist those, again, who are the victims of this great humanitarian crisis, and which probably we are only seeing the beginning of. And again, 2 million people, just a couple of days ago was at 1 million. So this crisis is accelerating, and we really need people like yourself who are dedicated to helping our community and others get through this. We're praying for the safety of your staff inside Ukraine and for all the men, women, and children who are in harm's way. So we wish you the very best and thank you for all you do. Thanks also to my B'nai B'rith colleagues, Alina, Bricman, and Andrea for being with us today and sharing insight into the important work that we are carrying out. And thank you for tuning in to Important Conversations with B'nai B'rith. If you would like to make a gift to the B'nai B'rith Ukraine Fund, please go to our website at b'naibrith.org. You can also help by making your voice heard and signing on to our action alert, which we just spoke about, located on our homepage, asking members of Congress to promptly address the grave crisis in Ukraine with robust U.S. aid. If you would like to get involved with B'nai B'rith's Women's Leadership Network, please contact Rebecca Rose at b'naibrith.org. And if you don't already, please subscribe to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter to keep up with the latest on our important work. Our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine during this extremely difficult time. Thank you all, and be safe.